She's got superpowers, but will she survive high school? You'll find out on Dear Watchers, an omniversal comic book podcast where we do a deep dive into the multiverse.
We are traveling with you through the stories and the worlds that make up an omniverse of fictional realities we all love. And your watchers on this journey are me, Selena. I'm going to be Selena. I just want to be, I'll be Faye Dunaway, but I can't remember. She has no last name, which is strange. But she does say at some point she's like part of the gods of Egron or I don't know, some made up stuff. So, but yeah, okay, I'll be Madam Selena.
Well, I'm going to take off my brown wig to reveal my naturally blonde hair. It's me, Rob.
I thought you would make a much better Brenda Vaccaro. Come on.
Oh, yeah. Hello, Guido. It's me, Rob.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, before we begin our trip to the comic book store and the multiplex, Guido, what's new in our little section of the multiverse?
Happy summer. It's the summer.
Yay,
It's the superhero summer we've been warning everyone about for so long. And this will be the start of it, I think, because, yeah, we've got Superman very soon from when we're recording and releasing this episode. Mm-hmm. And then we have Fantastic Four, of course, and we'll have some great themed episodes for those properties. And this is kind of the start of it. And we'll get more into where Supergirl might show up down the road after we dive in. This episode comes from inspiration because we just screened Supergirl last night.
Yes.
We shared a few episodes back with people that we have a company in upstate New York, Sleepover Trading Company, that does lots of screenings, and Supergirl was our screening last night. So that was one side of the inspiration. And then the other was a friend's comic store that he opened in Troy, New York called Cromulent Comics. And he happened to have these wild Supergirl imaginary stories that I had just been reading about. And so it all came together on literally the same day. We got the issue that I had read about and thought about, and we screened the movie. And it was like just meant to be.
Mm-hmm. And also,
it was like the Omega Hedron brought it us all together.
And I was going to say, and also we've been super busy. So we were like, what can we do where we've already seen the movie? But if you are joining us here on Dear Watchers for the first time, we have 3 parts of our journey through the multiverse today: origins of the story, exploring multiversity, and pondering possibilities. So thanks for coming along.
And remember, don't be a Selena and leave us a 5-star review on social media. You can find us at Dear Watchers, wherever you're listening. Please leave a review. Thank you.
And with that, welcome to episode 163, and let's check out what's happening in the Omniverse with our travels today's alternate universe. Today we are super excited.
Oh, that is basic.
Oh.
That is basic. But what are we super excited to hear?
Well, we're super excited to answer the question, what if Supergirl was dead and able to be amongst other dead people like Joan of Arc and Abraham Lincoln?
And Isaac Newton.
Yes.
So we have discussed Supergirl sort of on the periphery once way back in episode 75 years ago with our wonderful guest Tim Hantley, who we really need to have back soon, when we talked DC bombshells. But we did not dive into her DCU Earth Prime origin. We also briefly talked about her and her super pets and her horse when we talked about Lois's relationship with the horse.
She's got lots of pets.
She does. That was in episode 156 from earlier this year, but we have not covered Supergirl. We have also not covered this imaginary Earth. It is also known as the Negative Earth, aka Earth 383. I found out about it because it was in a recent issue of Back Issue magazine. That's issue 159 from June 2025, which is all about the 40th anniversary of Crisis on Infinite Earths. It's an incredible issue. And John Wells in that issue writes an article going through all of the DC multiverse prior to Crisis on Infinite Earths. And that's where I read about this very strange issue that we're going to cover. And there is only one appearance of this Earth 383. So we've got it all here for you today.
It kind of sounded like it was a reoccurring thing, but this is just a one-off.
No, and once we describe it to everyone, I think it'll be clear why it's not a reoccurring thing.
Yes. Well, as you said, we've kind of talked about her in the periphery, but Guido, what is your background with Supergirl?
Well, I love her, and she's not like my number one comic book character in DC, but I do love her. I haven't read every one of her issues though. I love her primarily through the movie. So probably unusual for most people, but we will talk a lot about this movie, but I watched this movie, probably the top 3 movies I watched the most as a child. Even watching it again at our screening last night, I can remember every beat of this movie, and it just makes me love Supergirl. I think it does a really good job of that for all of its flaws. And after that, my first introduction to her is probably in The Death of Superman, when she's actually the Matrix. It's actually not even Supergirl. It's that weird blob of clay. You know how she's not really Supergirl. I don't know if you remember that.
Not really, but yeah.
And so, and then there's a great run Peter David does that I went back and read because I love Peter David. But so anyway, I love her, but I don't consume all of her comics really until the last few years. And so I'm a big fan of the character, but I can't say I'm a huge fan of the comics, which is unusual for me and unusual for our discussions. I'm not well versed in her very confusing and complicated history, some of which we'll scratch the surface of today. But I really do love her largely because of this movie. What about you? What is your background with Supergirl, also known as Superman's cousin?
Well, for a character that's, I'm going to say pretty big, I mean, not in like the top echelon of DC characters, but like right under that, I'd say. I'm not super familiar with her.
You just said super again, and that was unintentional.
That was unintentional. See, it's in my head. I may have had like 1 or 2 random issues. Maybe it's from the Peter David run that you're mentioning, but never read it. I never saw the movie, which is strange because it definitely feels like the kind of movie that would have aired on WPI.
No, it was very hard to watch. They really buried it for a long time.
Yeah, and so I never saw that. And then actually when I was doing research for our screening, I was actually kind of surprised at how hard it was to find Supergirl clips outside of the movie. Like, she was not a character that popped up on Super Friends, for example.
No,
she did not have, like, the superpowers line of action figures. And then later, like, when Death of Superman era and, like, Superman's exploded, I found, like, of course, toys for Steel, for the leather jacket Superboy. Like, there's so much of that content out there, and that toys and things that were created.
Fast food promotions and stuff.
Totally.
Yeah.
And she is completely absent from all of it, which is kind of odd because, like, it was like mini Superman mania again at that time, and she is not there. So I think that's one of the reasons why she was never really someone I even really knew about until, like, the TV show, I would say, like the WB TV show.
She's definitely one of the more significant characters that has almost no exposure. You know, I'm not saying that clearly, but we talk a lot on this show, even sometimes when we talk about, like, from Wonder Woman through to Betty Boop in our last episode, like these people who are iconic and have images, but people don't necessarily know stories or know details about them. They just know the image. And Supergirl is a really good example where it's not even that people don't know it. It's that there's very little. She is literally just, the concept of the character is out there, but there's actually not even a whole lot about her until really the last 20 years. There's not merchandise, like you're saying. There's not a lot. So,
and perhaps people only know her there because she has the same power set as Superman. So it's
and
like,
the same outfit.
And
I think that helps a lot.
Yeah.
Like, she is,
Yeah, you just know who it is because it's like, oh, that's a female Superman. That's basically it.
Yeah.
For a lot of evil.
Yeah. Well, we'll explore all of that and more.
Yes. When? Well, right now. It's origins of the story.
Right now, on this very show, you're going to get the answer to all your questions. Our amazing story begins a few years ago.
Well, like you kind of hinted at, Guido, she has a long, complicated history, as many of these DC characters do. So we're not going to get into the ins and outs of her entire history story.
Why she changes her name to Linda Danvers?
No,
from Linda Lee. Yeah,
just going to touch
for
on
this.
that. But we do want to share a little bit of backstory on the character. So while Kara Zor-El is Supergirl, there are actually a few prototype versions of female supermen, that predate the character's introduction in 1959. So Lois Lane gets powers. Of course, Lois was always something was happening to Lois, and she dons a Superman-esque outfit in at least 2 issues, including one in 1951 where she wears a blonde wig. So she's got a reverse wig situation going on. Then in 1949, there's a story entitled Superboy Meets Supergirl, where Superboy meets the Queen Lucy, who gets this nickname Supergirl.
But it's Super Dash Girl, at least on the internet.
That's a later one. This is that.
Oh,
this
not
one
that
is
one?
just one.
Okay.
No. So this is just regular Supergirl. And then in some Silver Age silliness, on one occasion, and of course we will probably have to cover this one day, Superboy is transformed into a girl and adopts the name Claire Kent. But and she's decked out in the Supergirl outfit. And actually, the moral of the story is Clark learns to respect women more. That's what it said.
Well, that didn't stick, as we know.
Well, and finally, and this is probably the most important one, in August 1958, Jimmy uses a magic totem to wish and create a Super Dash Girl into existence. Unfortunately, this Supergirl is almost killed, and then she's wished out of existence by Jimmy. And DC actually used this story in 58 to gauge public response to the concept of creating a completely new female counterpart to Superman. And in fact, she has blonde hair, and her costume is actually very similar to Helen Slater's costume that was worn in the Supergirl film.
And most of her stories and her creation for the Supergirl that we all know and love were credited to Otto Binder.
Well, and Otto actually also wrote most of those ones that I just mentioned too. So
he was
Otto
trying out some
involved.
ideas. Mm-hmm. He had also created Mary Marvel, Captain Marvel's sister, and he created Miss America, the female Captain America for Marvel. So he maybe had a thing he was into doing, which is just create the same character but make it a girl. And when Supergirl debuted, she received a positive response. She would appear as backups in Action Comics regularly, and then does get her own series. She's a part of Superman's family and all of that. She does start as Linda Lee, then later Linda Danvers, something that tries to get retconned and reconciled years later after graduating from college. She also is a counselor and a news reporter and an actor in a soap opera. So she has all sorts of careers. But at the end of the day, it's her heroism that we know and love her for. So why don't we dive into her origin issue?
Yes, this is Action Comics number 252 from DC Comics from May 1959, and it's entitled The Supergirl from Krypton.
Written by Otto Binder, penciled by Al Plastino, inked by Al Plastino, and edited by Mort Weisinger. And we have discussed Binder before. He's written more than 4,000 comic books, including the first imaginary tale for Lois Lane, and just a DC legend. And Plastino co-created the Legion of Superheroes and had a long career in comic strips. So this is her debut appearance. She's introduced. How she arrives and her origin is explained through her just telling Clark or Superman how she got there, and then we get introduced to her powers when she lives at the orphanage in all of these ridiculous ways. And that's basically it. That's the whole introductory story to Supergirl. So did anything surprise you in reading this?
Well, what surprised me, I think, and obviously we're going to talk about the Supergirl movie later in this episode, but having just rewatched the movie, that there's some elements of the movie that are here in terms of that she is a survivor of Krypton, that they kind of like broke off from the rest of Krypton, and that's never really explained in the movie. But here, like, it's explained that like this broke off, there was like oxygen still around it, but the problem was that it is now becoming kryptonite, and there's all this other kind of stuff that happens with like they pour lead and all this. But like I was actually kind of surprised that that portion of then the movie actually does have its basis in this very first issue from 59.
And it's been retconned a lot in the DCU, so I was surprised to read it too and see it's sort of simple, but also sort of convoluted in a way that I like you were just describing. So what happens is, I don't even remember how, but the chunk of Krypton that they end up being able to survive on starts to convert to kryptonite, and so they have to put lead down in order to live, which is how it explains that Supergirl is so much younger than Superman, even though Krypton had exploded. So all these people, including her parents, continue to live, but then meteorites hit their chunk of planet and start to break the lead coating, and so they're all dying, and they have to send her out in a lead ship so that she won't die. So it's just, I don't know, I like it. There's something about it that I really liked a lot. It's complicated and rehashing Superman, but in a very unique way, I felt. So I liked her origin in that way.
And well, the funky thing though there is that when they need to send her out, they need to find a place to send her, and they get like a big telescope and they're able to see that Superman is on Earth, and they think, well, let's send her there because
she'll get powers there too.
She'll get powers there because they hear that he's also from Krypton. But it's interesting that like this entire time, like, did no one look in the telescope up to this point? Like, no one knew that there was also a survivor.
Well, I guess they were fine. I guess they figured No, I guess they figured there's no other survivors, and we've got our little chunk of planet. Who cares? Up until they were all dying. So yeah, interesting origin there on that side. And then Superman puts her in an orphanage and disguises her in a brunette wig of pigtails. And she goes by Linda Lee. And we find out she has all the same powers as Superman because she's cleaning her room with them, which is the most Supergirl-esque thing possible. And I mean that in terms of all these early Silver Age Supergirl stories are just ridiculous attempts at being like quote unquote girl comics, where like that's her conflict is like, oh, I have to fix my broken mirror, I'm going to use my heat vision, which doesn't even make sense from a physics standpoint. So
well, there's two things there that I'd love to address. One is we don't really know why, but she just randomly chooses this name Linda Lee, and there's this great panel of Superman where she says like, I'm gonna be Linda Lee, and he even goes something like okay, like, and then Superman has a thought bubble saying like, my first girlfriend was Lana Lang, and my new girlfriend is or whatever she is Lois Lane, and somehow she doesn't even know those people, and she chose LL. It's like, I don't know, it almost feels like this was, and we talked about this with some previous like Otto Binder written ones, where most of it is very sincere, but this almost feels like his commentary on the ridiculousness of some of these comics.
Though the way it's written, it almost, and this is not the case, but it almost feels like he's setting up a reveal. Like it's a weird, it's because it's written sincerely, it doesn't feel very like meta or tongue in cheek, which plenty of these Silver Age stories were. It just feels like, because it ends with a ... I think that's what's throwing me, is like Superman's thought is like, she chose this ... like as if there's something else there. So I don't know.
Will I start dating her next? Like,
Well, he will in another imaginary story that we are going to at some point for sure read, but we're not talking about today.
well,
So
the other point I wanted to make there too is you mentioned the disguise too, because like of course Superman famously has like these glasses, and obviously it's become like a joke, but and just kind of accepted as okay, whatever. He puts on these glasses and everyone thinks he's someone else. But here, like Kara has like a brown wig, like it's actually like a much bigger, better disguise. Like, do you think this was like Otto in 1959 saying, well, we just can't have glasses, that's like too silly, that's like the 30s, like at least like let's properly disguise her? Or is it because she's a girl and they wanted to do
I do
like,
think
what
it
you
has
think?
something to do with that, because there's even a page in one of the later issues that's like, write in and choose Kara's new hairstyle. Like, so I think that they were going for the fashion solution into some extent. I mean, maybe he didn't want to copy Clark's glasses. And how many options are there if you're talking about a simple way to disguise someone's like head appearance? It's really between glasses and like, you're not going to give her a fake mustache, or a fake nose or something would be weird for the artist to have to draw differently every time. So I think a wig makes sense. So I don't know if it's a commentary so much as it's just what they came up with and thought made sense for a girl.
Well, let's jump 10 years into the future for exploring multiversity.
I am your guide through these vast new realities. Follow me and ponder the question, what if?
So in those 10 years, she is in countless imaginary stories. It's actually odd to me how many of her appearances start to play with reality. I think it has a lot to do with the Silver Age, but it might have to do with this, again, attempt at like quote unquote girl comics and what they were trying to do with her. So this is not her first imaginary story. She's in Superman's girlfriend Lois Lane, classic imaginary stories, as we all know, and Superman's pal Jimmy Olsen a number of times. But this is the one that we landed on. So what was that?
This is Adventure Comics 383 from, and you could have read this if you were going to Woodstock, August 1969.
Clearly inspired by that,
Yes,
the hippie
they were
movement, right?
Reading that in the mud. This story is called "Please Stop My Funeral."
I do love that title.
Stop or my mom will shoot.
And
the question we're asking is, what if Supergirl was dead and able to be amongst other dead people like Joan of Arc and Abraham Lincoln and Sir Isaac Newton, too?
So this is written by Robert Kanigher, penciled by Win Mortimer, inked by Murphy Anderson, edited by Mort Weisinger. Still, the cover art is by Kurt Swan and Neil Adams. Kanigher is a really famous DC person we've talked about, who continued Wonder Woman after William Moulton Marston for 20 years and co-created Barry Allen. Win Mortimer was a main artist on Superman from the 40s to the 70s, including the comic strip. So quickly, do you want a little setup before we dig in? Because
Yes.
we'll explain the pacing of the story to everyone
Yes.
before we dig in. But what do you got?
Well, after a UFO she was stopping explodes, Supergirl appears to be a ghost and witnesses her own funeral. But is she really dead?
Yeah. So to explain what's going on, well, I won't explain what's going on yet. That will be, I think, the majority of our conversation. But most of the story is her trying to figure out what is happening. And in order to figure out what's happening, well, first, I don't even know why, but she ends up in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, after seeing her funeral and not knowing why she's witnessing her own funeral. She ends up in Gettysburg and sees Abraham Lincoln. And then there's all these really weird historical details put in, like she's pieced together that she didn't travel through time because Abraham Lincoln, there was an accident. so convoluted. This is one of those ones that's plotted by like someone throwing darts at something. There's a stand of the audience attending Abraham Lincoln's Gettysburg Address, but it's collapsing, and she helps to save it. But of course, no one can see her or hear her. And she realizes that never happened in history. So she's not traveled to the past. And then he refers to like Grant's battles in the past, and she doesn't know why that's happening. So then she decides to go to France because Napoleon should be in power. It's very strange.
Yeah, well, so just, we should back up a bit. She tries to stop this UFO. Actually, by the way, before she tries to stop the UFO, she also blows a piece of dust out of a little girl's eye.
I forgot that part. It's so ridiculous. I have no idea why that is how she's going to use her powers. Well, she doesn't even blow it out. She like sort of sucks it out. She like uses her super breath in reverse because there's a tiny piece of dust and this poor girl is tearing up because of it.
Excuse me, little girl. I'm going to suck on your eye for a second. And then,
it's so weird.
She sucks on this girl's eye. And then there's a UFO that's chasing like a U.S. spaceship. Who cares? And she goes to stop it, but the UFO has self-destruct. It blows up. And she thinks, oh, okay, I'm fine. And then, like, she sees Clark, and he's on his way to a funeral. He's wearing all black. And, of course, she gets there, and she thinks, like, oh, no. She realizes it's like a Scrooge moment. Oh, it's my funeral, and Batman's there, and everything. So, yeah, this part of it, for me, Guido, had, like, until, like, we get to the next part, had a very, like, Tales from the Crypt kind of like astonishing tales thing. Like there's so many stories there, right, where like someone is suddenly like at their own funeral and there might be a ghost.
Yeah, and that's what's neat reading this in the context of the early days of the multiverse. Like it wouldn't have been obviously it was apparent to us that in that explosion she got transported to another Earth. But if you were reading this at the time, you might not have realized that, and you were thinking like, oh, what is the twist? What is going on here?
Yeah.
Like a Twilight Zone type thing. But of course, we discover that she's on this other Earth.
Well, and then basically to get away from her funeral, because she's so upset, she like flies away, and then I guess like she thinks like, oh no, now I've journeyed back in time because I've flown that much. And she's at Gettysburg, and then she's at Joan of Arc, and then she's at Isaac Newton.
Well, so we didn't mention yet Joan of Arc. So that's so again, she goes to France thinking Napoleon's in power, which I can't quite make sense of, but like that's why she goes to France, and she encounters Joan of Arc, but she's confident she's not in the 15th century. So she still hasn't figured out what's happening. And then when she happens upon Isaac Newton, he is helping the Chinese figure out how to make a rocket launcher.
Yeah.
So he's using his, I guess, sense of gravity. They're using their expertise with firecrackers. And she's like, this never happened. Mm-hmm. So still, she hasn't totally figured out what is going on.
Yes. No. And then the rocket actually hits her, right? And she then wakes up and she's back where she started, and like it blew her out of this negative dimension.
Right. She's back on our Earth with still no explanation, but we all now realize she's back on our Earth. And then you get the two final panels of an explanation where she somehow realizes what happened, and it is so convoluted.
Yeah. And then her cousin Clark shows up piloting a helicopter, because that's also something that he does. And that this was all like a negative world. So in this world, everyone who was... So what is it again, Guido? It's like everyone who was dead then can see her now.
I have reread it countless times and I can't make sense of it. It's something like... So it's this Earth 383 is tied to Earth 1, which at the time is the prime Earth is Earth 1. And anyone who dies in Earth 1, their counter self in 383 somehow becomes like a negative apparition, or the earth itself is negative, and when you die you become positive and people can't see you. Like I don't know, I can't make sense of it. And it also then doesn't explain why Abraham Lincoln's giving the Gettysburg Address, but it's 1969 or it's contemporary to this story.
Well,
and why
I see that
Joan
part
of Arc,
because she
like,
does say
but
that she's
so
like
they're
flies
just
back in
all
time,
immortal?
like it breaks the. Well, no, she goes back in time. Like she's running so far from her funeral and so fast that she like
no,
time
but Joan of
travels
Arc
back.
does not overlap. Like all of these things
No,
don't
then she
overlap.
runs again, and she thinks she's gonna be running to France like at the same time. That's why she thinks Napoleon will be there. But in fact,
I
like,
don't
she
know
runs
if
so
this-
fast, like she runs
you're
back
trying
in
making
time
sense.
again.
Yeah, but then Isaac Newton's working with the Chinese to make rocket launchers, like people in China. So I don't. There's something that doesn't make sense about you have this Earth where when someone dies on Earth 1, they become this sort of apparition. But then I guess she's just encountering these weird worlds of these apparitions. And I guess I don't fully understand either. Like when she dies, she comes over so they can't see her. I don't know. I can't, I still can't make sense of it. And I've read it repeatedly.
My question for you is, so it actually starts before kind of all the action starts. She's actually in history class, and there's like a history question that she answers and gives like facts. Do you think there was, or do you know if there was an educational requirement or something? Because the whole thing with like, there's Abraham Lincoln, and like she gives a little bit of information about him. Like the whole thing felt like this was trying to be
that might have been an attempt
comic.
to appeal to, I don't know, parents or something. I have no idea. I mean, it's 1969, so we're well past the seduction of the innocent Frederick Wortham era. We're well past, I mean, we're still in the Silver Age kookiness of DC, but like we're past the heart of it. So I have no idea. They could be, making that decision, but they're not being forced to make that decision.
Because I was thinking like, oh, and maybe because like she's a girl, like they wanted to make it more educational and less.
I mean, that could be true from a
action-based.
marketing standpoint. Like maybe they determined that the Adventure Comics title with Supergirl should have these stories in it. I still really can't make sense of the story. It's probably the first episode in 163 episodes where I cannot make sense of this other Earth the question at play here.
Both of us had this experience reading it. It just kind of ends. And I actually thought, I went to the next page and there was a new story that was starting. And I was thinking, oh, so this story must like continue after that second story. It's just a weird way that they did the book. And it's like, no, wait, it doesn't continue. And it's like, oh, wait, it all wraps up in literally half a page. The other half of the page is an ad for something. And the whole thing wraps up in literally half a page after she sees Isaac Newton. So it feels like this very rushed ending that they kind of just like threw on there.
Yeah. So it's very strange, a very high concept, not executed well, but
the one thing that
cover.
is executed really well, because I laughed out loud, is a moment with Streaky the cat. We mentioned
the highlight of
Streaky
the issue
earlier. So she's got this cat, and the cat first scares away a bunch of dogs, and then what were the dogs on? The dogs were standing on a picture of Supergirl. Somehow there's just a picture of Supergirl in an alley. The dogs were standing on it.
Because in this world, she died, right?
She's
so everyone's
died,
grieving her.
And Streaky turns over the picture, and we can even hear Streaky's thoughts as well, which is also like a weird thing. And Streaky can't see Supergirl, who's there watching this. And then we just get this one panel of Streaky just like crying, like cats. I would imagine, I'm not an animal expert, but I don't think they can actually cry in real life. That is just like Streaky is just bawling looking at this picture, a black and white picture of Supergirl. That I did laugh out loud.
Yeah, it is. It is a highlight from an otherwise strange but brief issue. So can't recommend it, but I can't say it was painful to read. That's for sure. So I don't think either of us need to go back to Earth 383 unless someone wants to explain it to me and have it make sense. Then maybe I'd consider a revisit to Earth 383.
Well, throw on your flowing witchy caftans, Guido, because it's time for some
Madame
pondering
Selena, that is.
possibilities.
Will the future you describe be averted, averted?
So, Guido, what are we talking about for our pondering possibilities?
Well, we are keeping our rule of chronological order, but we are going to live very far in the past, 41 years in the past to be precise, and talk about Supergirl, the motion picture, 1984, because it's a great another version of Supergirl for us to discuss. And we know that the Supergirl film has completed filming and is coming out next year, 2026. So there's a lot to think about in terms of the new DC universe. But let's look at the 1984 DC universe on film with Supergirl.
Supergirl, the motion picture from 1984. It was produced by the Salkins, who had produced the previous Superman movies, distributed originally by TriStar and then by Warner Brothers, who of course had released the earlier films, who had acquired it back decades later.
Yes. And the movie is directed by Joan of Arc.
Sure.
Screenplay is by David Odell. And it stars Helen Slater, Faye Dunaway, and a whole bunch of other people. But those are the only two that you really need to know. Maybe Brenda Vaccaro, but that's it. There is a single issue adaptation comic book of the movie that is incredibly faithful to the script of the movie. So we are going to talk about the movie, but that adaptation actually has amazing art by Gray Morrow. It's written by Joey Cavalieri, but amazing art by Gray Morrow. But we are going to talk about the movie, which you had never seen until I made you watch it a few years back. And then last night was probably your second time seeing it.
Well, I want to mention one of the creators real quick. So David Odell, who's the writer, and this is not someone whose name you know a lot, but Guido, especially for you, he's sculpted your childhood. So he was Emmy nominated for The Muppet Show and uncredited writer of the Muppet movie. And then he wrote The Dark Crystal and the Masters of the Universe movie. These are two things you literally have tattoos of on your body. So David Odell was that integral to your life somehow.
Yes. That he is. And then he directed Martians Go Home in 1990.
Oh, well, that's your next tattoo right there. Yeah.
Randy Quaid. I mean, it has good pedigree.
Peter O'Toole.
The actors are high quality.
Actors.
The budget was low-ish, but for the time, not that low at $35 million. The movie only brought in $14 million globally. Wow. So it was a total failure, a complete and utter failure. And there's a lot of reasons why. It sounds like we tried to read some backstory, and the Salkins were having issues with Warner Brothers at the time. So Warner backed out. That's why TriStar distributed it. But by having that happen, distribution was really spotty. Apparently the VHS came out in Japan while the movie was being released in theaters, so people could watch it. And that was the extended version, which makes a little bit more sense than the non-extended version. We read Ilya Salkin said that Janot was too nice, and that made the movie pretty weak in her mind, because she said they had some great conflicts with Richard Donner and Richard Lester, and that made those movies stronger, whereas they had no conflicts here, and so the movie was kind of weak. And then, of course, Christopher Reeves was supposed to be in it, and that was a huge part, and David Odell has said that the script never was fixed after they had to rip out all of the Superman cameo stuff, because it sounds like it was actually going to be a little more than a cameo at various times. and they never fixed those holes.
And there's
in the
all this
script,
stuff
so.
then in the movie ultimately where like she knows all this stuff about Clark, and like you kind of like it kind of is like, well, how does she? It's never explained as like how she knows who Clark Kent is, and yet there's other things like she actually is rooming with Lois Lane's sister, but has never heard of Lois Lane, so she knows who Clark is. She knows he works at the Daily Planet, but she's never heard of Lois. So like all that like screams of like, well, something just is like isn't adding up here in terms of like the script.
There are, I think what you and I can agree on, and hopefully our listeners agree or take this as our review and go watch this, is that for a movie that is very deeply flawed, it's still very enjoyable. And it's really strange because it's not one of those movies that's like so bad that you're enjoying the mess of it. You're not enjoying the mess of it because the mess is sort of narrative. But all the performances are so good. The production value is great. I think her costume looks great. The special effects are on par with Superman.
Yeah.
So the movie, like, it's fun and there's something there, and yet narratively it is so off, and like there's so many things that don't make sense. There's motivations that don't make sense. There's questions about how she knows certain things. I love that, like, 3/4 of the way into the movie, she's like living on Earth. She's figured out how to use a typewriter to fake her reference letter to live at the orphanage. And then all of a sudden, like, someone says something about catching a train, and she goes, "What's a train?" And it's just so absurd. It's so stupid. It's like, does she know how humans live or not? Like, you can't have it both ways, that she knows to go eat at Popeyes, to go meet her friends at Popeyes Chicken.
There's
but
a lot
she
of
doesn't
Popeyes,
know what
there's
train
a lot of
is.
A&W root beer. There's well,
weird.
One of the flaws of the movie, and I think Helen Slater is certainly, you know, good in the movie, but I think one of the flaws of it is that she doesn't have a distinct characterization as Linda versus Supergirl. Like, you don't, like, that's one of the geniuses, especially of Christopher Reeve's performance in Superman and Superman 2, is like Clark is such a different character than Superman, and like he's so good at that, and like you love being with Clark just as much as you love being with the action sequences. Here it's like when it's just Linda, it's like, oh, it's Linda. It's like if you don't but it's mostly because she doesn't have like any personality, like at all.
She's like very naive and doe-eyed, and she's like that as Supergirl too. I mean, there's a few good Supergirl like regaining her strength moments, but on the whole, you're right. She's this like very innocent, trying to understand the world.
And she doesn't have a problem. Like, Clark's like fundamental problem as a character is like, I'm in love with Lois and I have to be Superman and I have to keep this secret. Like, here, like, Supergirl's only motivation is to get back this like MacGuffin device, basically. But like, aside
the
from
Omega-hedron.
but aside from that, like, she doesn't have any other like, she has no real like, you know,
well, I guess her other problem is that she has a construction worker that has to be at least 10 years her senior, and she's probably a teenager, and he's in love with her because of the magical spell that Selena cast upon him. So that's a problem.
That is, but it's not the same, certainly.
No, and it doesn't show up as a problem. She sort of just leans into it and then breaks up with him at the end. So
definitely, I think the highlight of this movie, and I'm sure you would agree, are like the three villain characters who are very much like in line with the three villain characters in Superman, with like Lex Luthor, Miss Tessmacher, and Otis.
Oh, I thought you were gonna say like Feora, Zod, and the other one.
No, with like the three like wacky humans. No. Yeah. And but also, and I'm sure this reminded me. Well, it reminded me of this. It was like also it's very Batman 66, because you got like your main villain, and then you've got like the henchman villain who like is like wisecracking, and then like maybe another, and then like a third villain. But Faye Dunaway, Brendan Vaccaro, and Peter Cook, who are like the three like villains of this, are definitely the ones having a good time, very enjoyable. They definitely have the best dialogue in the film by far.
Yes. Well, I think what's fun too, and this is why I thought you'd love this movie, and I think you do love it a bit, but Faye Dunaway's Selena is just, other than some confusing stuff with motivation when she just becomes obsessed with this construction worker. But let's remove that as a narrative flaw, one of the many narrative flaws in the movie. Like, she is just your quintessential megalomaniacal, like mustache twirling villain who she just wants power to take over the world. And the production leans into this. I mean, at one point she is full on Hitler. She is driving in like a classic German car, clearly, down the street with her soldiers all around her. Like, it really is just so, they just let her be a completely insane villain. And I think that is to its benefit, quite honestly. Again, other than the fact that then she becomes obsessed with having this construction worker love her and not Supergirl, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense for the character. But
and I guess we probably don't know because it didn't say this in some of the research you were saying, but why was it this character that they created? Why Selena? Like, is it because Supergirl doesn't really have an iconic villain? Like, do you have any sense of why they went ahead and created this character?
Not a clue, but I'll tell you that I'm waiting for someone to debut her in the comic book universe. And this run that's currently happening of Supergirl might be it, because there is some magic and it feels fitting.
Because it seems crazy because there's so many like Batman 66 villains that then like got introduced like years later, right?
And
like,
I really have no idea. I guess if they were thinking we need a human nemesis that cuts your people down, I guess if they were thinking let's have a little bit of a Lex Luthor, I mean, Faye Dunaway is not a foil to Helen Slater in this, but if they were like, let's have someone who is a human antagonist, like laser set on Supergirl, then they did this. I don't know why she's a witch. I don't know why. None of this makes sense, but it works. She lives in an abandoned amusement park. It's perfect. Like,
yes,
who cares?
Yeah. And like, you know, the original movie, it's like we're getting an Oscar-winning actor to like play the part, like, because the lead was an unknown, so they went like Oscar-nominated actor, Oscar-winning actor, Oscar-nominated actor as the henchman. Like, that's putting all the pedigree there into the villain area.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, well, and in her family. I mean, Mia Farrow is her mother. Peter O'Toole is her mentor. I mean, it's like there are a lot of great people in this, and most of them sort of chew the scenery when they're on screen, and I don't mind it.
Yeah. And there's one actor, the only actor who kind of provides some continuity is Mark McClure, who is Jimmy Olsen in the Christopher Reeve movies. He does pop up here, and he's like the only one that is like, oh yeah, this is officially a part of a bigger franchise. It's definitely not the kind of thing like in the MCU world that we have now that would happen, because like it would be much more tied in than this one tangential character that showed
Though
up.
they do a good job, like they put on the car radio when Selena's driving that Superman is busy fighting someone in outer space to explain that he's not there. So they're definitely trying to set it in continuity canonically. It is being filmed around the time of Superman 3, and it's released after 2. It should be considered canonical with those movies, and it's not. It's never been released in a box set with those movies. Like they've never. Yeah, it's very frustrating because I don't know. I think we can definitely speculate that there's some sexist arguments to be made here about how they treat this movie. There's so many wild distribution things because, again, Warner was getting pissed at the Salkins and were really angry that they sold the rights off to this, and so they cut ties at the time. But Warner got this movie back maybe 15 years ago and have the rights, and they've only released it on the Warner Archive collection. They haven't even done like a big release of it, and it's not terrible. I mean, it's bad, but like there's some magic there. It just doesn't work, but it keeps you drawn in for sure.
Would you want to read a Supergirl 84 comic like they've done for Batman and Superman?
Yeah, it's a great idea. Yeah. Yes. Yeah, because it could fix a lot of those plot holes. It could give us more of a sense. I mean, first of all, it could give us Selena in the comics, but it could just give us more of who is Supergirl, what's her relationship to Superman. There's so much about the Phantom Zone in here that's
and
makes
like these
no
shadow
sense.
demons and stuff
Totally.
like that. Like that really don't get explained at all.
No, all with great special effects too, but they just they make no sense. And so I think a comic could create a little bit of coherence with some of those pieces, give us a little backstory, give us a little more to them, tell us what happens after this movie, because of course she just leaves with the Omegahedron. And so I guess she goes back to Argo City. Like, I don't.
And spoiler
really know.
alert, like Peter O'Toole is like he's then like he's in the Phantom Zone, and then he gets like sucked back into the Phantom Zone, but he's not like dead. So it feels like that character was also like, and it almost feels like they kept him alive in the movie because, this is going to be a hit and we need a sequel, and then we're going to bring Peter O'Toole back for like a very Marlon Brando kind of role.
Or one of the cutscenes too is actually Nigel, Selena's ex and the Warlock. He picks up the container that she was keeping the Omegahedron in, which is like the thing that turns into the demon at the end, and I can't remember what it's called. It's on the ground after Supergirl puts everything back to normal. He picks it up on the ground and walks away with it. So that feels like another kind of let's seed a few things around in case this works. I think it was clear by the time it was coming out that it wasn't going to work, which is probably why there was so little promotional tie-in, so little behind it. But there's definitely pieces that feel like they would have been used had this been a franchise in and of itself. So
yes, the terrifying villain names of Selena, Bianca, and Nigel.
But really, if someone hasn't seen this movie, it's worth watching. Again, look, you're going to see a very, very imperfect movie, but you will probably find some things that you appreciate about it.
Yeah, especially with friends. Like, it's not, like you said, it's not a movie that's so bad it's good, but it is a movie definitely to see with a few other people because it kind of benefits from the collective experience of, there's some things to laugh at, and like, but you can also enjoy it all at the same time.
And before we wrap up this episode, what do you want from next year's Supergirl? So now we've read her origin, we've read her imaginary story, and we've seen her original movie. What do you want James Gunn's Supergirl next year to be?
I think I want her to have a unique problem to solve because I think there's easy to go, she's just a clone of Superman and it's the same issues as Superman. And some of the WB TV show had some of that. Or like in this movie where like she's almost a non-entity, almost a bit as a character. Like I want her to have a very distinct characterization, but also not just be, I'm just Clark and Superman but in a skirt. Like have her be her own character. That's what I would really want from this.
Yeah. I want that. And then the other thing I want is, because we didn't get this, I love Melissa Benoist's Supergirl also. But what we didn't get from that Supergirl or this Supergirl is the interplay with Superman. Mm-hmm. And I want to see, how do they coexist? What does it mean that he is not the last survivor of Krypton anymore? Yeah. Like, I want all of that to be here. Now, if this is adapting Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow, which James Gunn has pretty much confirmed it is, then she's not going to be on Earth at the time. So we might not get their interplay until later in the universe. But I do at some point just want, these characters have to be intertwined. They wear the same costume. They're from the same planet. Like, they can't be on their own franchises, like the way so many Marvel characters can be in their own franchises and then meet up for the Avengers. You can't do that with Superman and Supergirl. They have to exist together. And so that excites me to see what that's going to be like, and to see if there's going to be a surprise Supergirl appearance in Superman movie this summer. I doubt there is, but certainly down the road, I'm looking forward to how they do tie in together.
No, we'll have to cover one of those one of her many other imaginary stories. Definitely.
Oh my gosh, she's a
her movie
werewolf.
comes closer.
She
Everyone's a
Superman
werewolf.
marries
Everyone becomes a
Superman
werewolf
marries a
at some
clone
point.
of her, which is really
Oh,
creepy.
yeah.
I
Ooh,
mean,
that
it
is
just
weird.
goes on and on. Yeah. But for now, that, dear watchers, is a wrap. I have been Madam Selena.
And I have been. I'm in a round wig, but not really. Rob.
The reading list and watching list is in the show notes. Follow us at Dear Watchers, dearwatchers.com.
Leave us a 5-star review wherever you listen. We'll be back soon with another trip through the multiverse.
In the words of Uatu, keep pondering the possibilities.